When you hear the words Hollywood's golden age, what comes to mind? Probably shimmering gowns, epic movies, pure cinematic magic, right? But, underneath all that glamour was a really dark, really destructive secret. Today, we're going to pull back that curtain on the addiction that fueled the Dream Factory and see how it brought some of its absolute brightest stars to total ruin. It usually started out pretty innocently. Maybe a drink to wind down after a long day on set, a social thing. But for so many, what began as just a simple pleasure, well, it quickly spiraled into this relentless, all-consuming obsession. It was an addiction that would end up costing them their health, their careers, and, in the most tragic cases, even their lives. For decades, the studios worked tirelessly to protect their stars, and maybe more importantly, their secrets. But the truth, it can't stay buried forever. So what was really going on behind the closed doors of those fancy Beverly Hills mansions? Let's dive in and uncover the chilling reality behind some of Hollywood's most celebrated icons. Okay, so the first thing the addiction always came for was the image. That carefully crafted public persona, the one the studio spent millions on, it started to crack. And it revealed this chaotic reality that no amount of PR spin could cover up. This was really the beginning of the end. The public fall from grace. Let's take Elizabeth Taylor, for instance. Life magazine was calling her a mythical beauty, right? But her private reality was a whole different world. She'd show up on set hours late, sometimes still passed out from the night before. And while the world saw this glamorous queen, her own children were reportedly being neglected. It got so bad that neighbors told the Daily Mail they were often left hungry, having to rely on the maid for food. Just a world apart. And then, of course, there was Judy Garland. The entire world fell in love with her as Dorothy, MGM's sweet, innocent golden girl. But by the late 1950s, that image had completely shattered. The same press that used to adore her started running headlines about her collapsing drunk on stage. The Los Angeles Times even created a regular column called Where is Judy Now?, literally just to track all her scandals. It got to the point where prestigious places like the Copacabana Club just flat out banned her. So as the addiction got a tighter and tighter grip, these private struggles started spilling out into public, and in some really shocking and dangerous ways. This wasn't just about a tarnished reputation anymore. No, this thing escalated into a full-blown trail of mayhem, violence, and reckless endangerment. So what does a crippling addiction actually look like? Well, for the legendary actor Richard Burton, it looked like this number: 3. That's how many bottles of vodka he could reportedly down in a single day. And the craziest part, according to his director, even after all that, Burton would declare he was more sober than anyone else in the room. And that level of drinking, well, it had terrifying consequences. In 1967, a drunk Richard Burton got behind the wheel of his Cadillac and drove straight into 2 pedestrians on Sunset Boulevard. And this wasn't some one-off incident either. His life was just riddled with drunken brawls and completely out-of-control behavior that put himself and literally everyone around him in danger. But Burton was not alone in thinking his fame made him invincible. Humphrey Bogart. We all know his image, the tough, cool anti-hero, but his off-screen reality was way more menacing. He was involved in a fatal drunk driving accident. He got into public brawls where he'd literally throw bottles at people. He seemed to genuinely believe his stardom put him above the law. He once screamed at police, "I'm a star, I do whatever I want." For him, fame wasn't a privilege, it was a shield. And this recklessness even bled onto the movie sets. Errol Flynn, the swashbuckling hero, was often so drunk he became a massive liability. During one shoot, he was so out of it he completely crashed through a huge wooden set piece, forcing Warner Bros. To spend a fortune rebuilding it. This wasn't just unprofessional anymore, it was straight up dangerous. So you're probably asking yourself, how on earth did they get away with all of this? Well, the answer lies with the Hollywood machine itself. The studios, they worked overtime. Not to help their stars, but to hide their scandals. And in doing so, they created this pattern of systemic complicity. Just look at this slide. It reveals a really clear and disturbing pattern. Bogart's fatal accident, the case files were mysteriously reduced. Burton hitting those pedestrians, he got a slap on the wrist, a suspended sentence after the studio stepped in. For stars like Spencer Tracy and Errol Flynn, the playbook was always the same: bribe officials, pay secret settlements, and just make the problem disappear. See, these stars weren't just actors, they were financial assets, and the studios would do anything to protect their investments. But, cover-ups and payoffs, they could only delay the inevitable for so long. For so many of these stars, a life consumed by alcohol led to a final, irreversible consequence. And this is where the glamour just completely fades away, leaving only the grim, stark reality of addiction's endgame. Humphrey Bogart once famously said, "Life without martini isn't worth living." It was a line that just perfectly captured his tough guy persona. But tragically, it was also a prophecy. His doctor warned him, told him that years of hard liquor were literally destroying his body, but Bogart just refused to listen. In 1957, he died of esophageal cancer. His defiant words pretty much became his own epitaph. The end wasn't always a slow decline, though. Sometimes it was a sudden, horrifying fall. And that was the case for William Holden, the Oscar-winning star of Sunset Boulevard. On screen, he was this brilliant actor, but in private, he was a heavy, solitary drinker. One night back in November 1981, he was drunk in his Santa Monica apartment, and he slipped and fell, hitting his head hard. And what's so horrifying is that nobody knew. He bled to death completely alone. His body was only discovered 4 days later after neighbors finally reported a smell. When the news broke, the New York Post ran this headline. It's brutal for sure, but also tragically accurate. It just perfectly captured the lonely reality that was hiding behind all that Hollywood fame. And what about the great John Barrymore? I mean, they once called him Shakespeare Reborn. He suffered a complete mental and physical collapse. Alcoholism caused such severe brain damage that he lost his memory, suffered from delusions. In one really chilling incident, he actually tried to drink a bottle of Chanel No. 5 perfume, insisting it was the finest liquor. His story ends in this grotesque prank, where his friends propped his corpse up in a chair just to scare Errol Flynn. A truly morbid finale for a genius who was just destroyed. But maybe the most shocking story of all is that of Oscar winner Gig Young. His 1969 Academy Award was seen as this huge, triumphant comeback. But behind the scenes, he was completely unraveling. These chilling words, found in his journal, they kind of hint at the darkness that was about to be unleashed. And the climax came on October 19, 1978. He was just 3 weeks into his marriage. Police were called to his apartment, and there they found his new wife, Kim Schmidt, shot dead. Beside her lay Gig Young, dead from a self-inflicted gunshot. The man who had received a standing ovation at the Oscars had committed a murder-suicide. It was the fall of stunning, terrifying speed, from the industry's highest honor to its most horrific crime. These stories, they're a blood-soaked lesson about the true price of fame and the incredible, destructive power of addiction. That specific era of studio cover-ups might be over, but it really leaves us with this lingering question. Has the industry truly changed? Or does the pressure to perform still